As things quiet down around the NHL, we're going to talk about teams' summer to-do lists. We've got that, plus our women's hockey spotlight coming up next on the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Friday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I am Gil Martin from Locked On Islanders. I am joined every Friday by my co-host Rachel Donner of Locked On Flyers. And Rachel, how you doing in this mid-June Friday?
Well, it's July, first off.
July, yeah. Oh gosh, yes. Thank you.
It is warm. I'm kind of over it, and I would like hockey to be back. Although there's a little bit of hockey going on with the Beauty League going on this summer, so holding on to that.
Have you watched any of that, or
a little bit? Because there's 3 Flyers involved in the league.
There you go. So a little 4-on-4 there, huh?
Sometimes, yeah.
But NHL teams, even though it's kind of quiet on the surface, still a lot of things they need to do during this offseason. And let's maybe start with the most obvious. There's one NHL team out there that doesn't have a coach.
Yeah, that is the Columbus Blue Jackets. And, I think it's really interesting because they took a little while to make a decision to let their previous coach go. And so now they were like in a weird spot in terms of the coaching carousel. And, who could it be at this point? Because, supposedly Todd McClellan was in the running, but now he's not. So, or apparently not. So they have a lot of work to do.
They do. And, there are still some names out there. I mean, I've heard Jay Woodcroft as a possibility, but, you would have thought that is something they would have wanted to have taken care of before the draft.
Yeah. And, they have like some assistant coaches right now. And so, what's going on with them and the fact that none of them are worthy enough of getting a promotion to head coach, apparently it's going to be somebody else. And then they have to be like, well, what do we do now? Should we be planning when we don't have a boss to tell us what we should be doing? Right.
It makes it hard to figure out the direction that you want the team to go in, what kind of roster you want to build. It really puts the organization a little bit behind the 8 ball here during the offseason. And obviously, the sooner they straighten out this situation and have a direction and know what they want to do, the sooner they can get to work on getting there.
Yeah, I think that's part of it too. And the Blue Jackets have made some changes, in the player personnel this offseason, and they have a lot of good young prospects coming up. So I think that, it really would behoove them to have somebody in charge to start communicating and figure out what, the players should be doing this off season in order to prepare and be ready for camp. And they have none of that information right now.
Yeah.
So they can go fishing and,
and think a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a sort of a difficult situation there. And, look, you still do have, let's say, 6-7 weeks before training camp. But again, the clock is ticking. And certainly you want to get your organization in place and start doing that. And the longer this goes, I think also the worse it makes the team look.
Yeah, I think so too. So hopefully they get that straightened out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we will see how that works. And then, there are NHL teams that, as of right now, cannot field a 23-man roster because the cap space doesn't add up. I could start with the team I cover, the New York Islanders. Right now, only have room for 21 players on their roster, and they have less than $1 million worth of cap space to work with. Still have a couple of RFAs that they need to bring back, including Simon Holmstrom. So something's got to give, and that means really that a move has to be made to free up cap space. But I don't know what, if anything, Lou Lamoriello is going to do.
Yeah, it is interesting because at this point, there are some teams that do have full 23-man rosters. Some don't. Some of them have cap issues to deal with. The Washington Capitals, ironically, having just purchased cap friendly and now making the rest of us do some additional math, which not cool. Still upset about it. Now they do have the Backstrom and Oshie injuries that basically wipe out their massive cap overage, but just on paper, I find it ironic that they have the biggest cap overage and they just bought cap friendly. But I think, that'll work itself out. I'm not really worried for them. But, of course, you have the Golden Knights are over, but they're full. The Avs are a little over, but they have injuries to deal with, and we're still not sure what's going on with Landeskog as far as what kind of shape he'll be in. But they only have 19 players on their roster, and free agency is essentially over. So it's like, are they going to have prospects moving up into those roster spots? Are they going to try and sign free agents? The Stars are at 19 at the moment. The Rangers are at 20. The Habs are at 19. And so I think like with some of these teams, it absolutely will be prospects that will take these roster spots because it's the nature of things. But there's a lot, teams have some work to do, and there's a lot of math involved.
Yes, there is a lot of math involved, which I didn't sign up for, by the way. But yeah, I mean, again, and also keep in mind that over the offseason, you can be 10% over the cap and still be compliant.
Yeah. Yes.
But by the time game one, opening night comes around, you've got to be back under that salary cap. And I think what we'll see probably, you mentioned prospects. I think that is a very real possibility. And before you get to those prospects, you're either going to waive or trade or move some of these veterans or place them on LTIR if they're eligible. But even with the cap going up the way it did, you've got a lot of teams dealing with a lot of issues, and the season hasn't even started yet.
Yeah, and I think Minnesota Wild fans are obviously very excited because this is the last year they have to deal with that situation with the Suter and Parise contracts. So, one more year of terrible math and then they are free. But nonetheless, they still have to do it.
Yeah, they still have to deal with that move. And look, unfortunately, what they did is essentially pushing back the debt. Eventually, you got to pay it, and it'll certainly feel good for the Wild when it is indeed paid off. But they have to struggle one more year with it, and it may reflect in the standings the fact that they don't have a lot of cap space.
Yeah, it will absolutely, but yeah, there is a lot of maneuvering that has to happen this off season while everybody's on vacation.
Yeah, and that will certainly keep us busy heading into August and September when teams start making those moves and figuring out how to get under the cap. But, just because it's quiet on the surface, there's a lot going on behind the scenes that NHL teams have to take care of during this offseason. We are going to continue discussing our NHL summer to-do list. We'll also have our women's hockey spotlight with Erica L. Ayala. We've got all that and more coming up on this episode of the Locked On NHL podcast.
It is summer, which makes me think of baseball, and especially with my Philadelphia Phillies being a ton of fun this season, I want to be there in person as much as possible. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting those tickets faster and easier, and prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, the view from your seat, and their low price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying those coveted MLB tickets in your town, summer concerts, and so much more. My favorite part of the Game Time app is that it's great for getting notified about those last minute flash deals, and they let you save even more with zone deals, where you pick a section and let Game Time choose the seat for you. Best of all, they have all in pricing, so there's no surprise fees at checkout, and your tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through email. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem with the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Rachel, these to-do lists, they're pretty lengthy. And what else do we have next on the to-do lists?
Well, I think, for one team in particular, the Pittsburgh Penguins need to re-sign Sidney Crosby. And, they've been talking about it for some time now. They say they're close on a deal, but the thing, there's a lot of things that make me feel old sometimes, but the fact that Sidney Crosby is going to be on a 35 and over deal for the next contract is very humbling at best. But, he took a very team-friendly deal the last time around, partially because he's superstitious and it was for $8.7 million, right? But I think that was an extremely generous thing because he was worth more than that, for sure. And even with the cap being different at the time he signed that contract, though these many years ago now, I feel like, he has been underpaid to some degree. And, he has said that he's going to finish out his career with Pittsburgh, regardless of the fact that, the team is in not so great circumstances at the moment overall, but, he should get a $10 million deal. And so, but how long at this point? And so is it going to be 3 years? Is it going to be 4? Like, what is the best thing for the organization and for him, right?
Yeah, and it becomes a situation now where Crosby, like you said, took a little bit less money in his last deal. Now the Penguins are going to pay him more for his past performance than for his future performance, and that's not where a team wants to be.
No, and especially, a team that's in transition right now. And I think that, Dubas is trying his best to try and hold the existing ship afloat while building a new one in dry dock. And it's a whole different kind of challenge for him. And I think, maintaining, the relationship with Crosby and making sure that, he knows he's still the center of this organization, which he does, but building around that when you have to spend more money on an aging superstar is not an easy challenge.
No, it is definitely something that the team is going to have to figure out. Won't be easy to do, but we'll see. Another team with their captain kind of up in the air. What are the Toronto Maple Leafs going to do about John Tavares? He's got a year left on his deal. There have been some rumors that the team might strip him of the C, although that hasn't come to fruition at this point. But do they keep Tavares beyond this contract, or do they look to move on from him? And then how does Mitch Marner's situation play into all of that?
Yeah, and the fact that the Marner situation has not been resolved yet is a huge deal because he's like the guy who's on the trading block for everybody's, pretend trades or mock trades that they have for for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they are a hot mess. It is just for a team that's so talented in so many ways. There's so many questions here, and I think you start pulling threads on leadership on that team. That is a dangerous path for a team that's already fragile.
It is. And, I covered John Tavares when he was with the Islanders. He is not a rah-rah type of leader. He is not the most vocal guy, at least not publicly. I wonder whether or not they want him to continue as captain, or whether or not there's another player on that roster who they might consider going with. And then, figuring out, do you keep those four big offensive weapons together? Can you afford to? How do you prioritize them? Again, a lot going on in Toronto, and the Maple Leafs have a lot to figure out.
Yeah, I think so. That is a team with a lot of questions and not a lot of answers at the moment. And while everybody's out of town, I'm sure they're furiously trying to sort things out and come out with a reasonable solution that everybody's going to be happy with, whether it's the Marner issue, whether it's Tavares, and getting a roster together moving forward.
Yeah, going to be challenging for sure. But look, the Maple Leafs, a lot at stake, really, if you think about it, because these are such core parts of the team, and definitely core parts of the cap structure that they are having to deal with going forward. Another thing on the to-do list, teams that have struggled with different facets of their game, especially special teams. How do teams work on improving their PK and their power play? Again, dealing with limited cap space. Let's start with your Flyers.
Yeah, Flyers had the worst power play in the NHL this past season, and they elected to not fire the assistant coach who was in charge of the power play. And they have talked about making it a team effort to try and fix it, getting, even the player development coaches involved, like Patrick Sharp and John LeClaire and guys like that who have been kind of behind the scenes, working with prospects, but, really solid NHL players in their own right and could have some input here. But yeah, I found that to be really interesting. The Blue Jackets had the second worst power play, and they don't have a head coach. So, what are they going to? Yeah. We talked about, the Pens needing to re-sign Crosby. They had the third worst power play, which, given the personnel on that team, was absolutely ludicrous. So that is a huge problem for them to fix. And I feel like there's some assistant coaches with a lot of X's and O's on whiteboards this summer, trying to figure out some strategies and things to start working on in next year's training camp to see what might work.
Yeah, and then from the penalty kill standpoint, the Islanders were dead last in the league. Now, they did move on from Doug Huda, who was the penalty kill coach, brought in Tommy Albaline, but player-wise, they don't have even the same guys they had last year. Cal Clutterbuck, not signed as of right now. JG Pageau still on the roster, but quite possibly, the center of a lot of trade rumors. They haven't brought in anybody necessarily who's going to kill penalties. I don't think Anthony Duclair is going to be given that task, although he did do it a little bit in Ottawa. So how the Islanders are going to address their penalty kill is also going to be something that this team needs to figure out. And again, part of it is personnel, part of it is strategy, but this is the time of year when you got to start figuring out how to fix these problems.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the Anaheim Ducks had the second worst PK in the league, and their assistant coach, who was hired to work on the penalty kill, was the former head coach of the Bridgeport Islanders.
Yes.
So I think there's some sort of connection there that has led to a not so successful penalty kill. And I like that's been a huge part of it. And, they didn't make a coaching change on that front this off season either. But, I think that they haven't really made enough personnel changes that should affect that yet, but they do have a lot of young players. Maybe some of them could be contributing to the penalty kill there. There will be some significant roster changes. So who knows, but it's just fascinating.
Yeah, and something to keep an eye on as we go through the summer and lead up to training camp. We have got a lot more to get to on today's show. We will be joined by Erica Ayala for our bi-weekly women's hockey spotlight. She talks to Daryl Watts. We've had that and a lot more coming up on this episode of the Locked On NHL podcast.
We are here with another women's hockey spotlight, talking to another Toronto player on women's hockey spotlight. This time joining us is Daryl Watts. Now, you signed with Toronto. This will be your second upcoming season in the PWHL, and we'll get into all of that. But first, Daryl, I just want to talk, what were your overall impressions coming into a brand new league, once again for women's ice hockey, but some epic returns in season one? What was your take from the perspective on the ice?
It was incredible. I think everyone in women's hockey was so excited to have one singular league where all the best players in the world, out of college were competing, head on head. So that was incredibly exciting and so much fun to, just play against all of my peers and, big names, small names. It just gave opportunity to so many that, few had in the past. And then, the media attention for the PWHL was incredible. And that was something that really surprised me. I didn't really know what to expect for this season. Just because, women's hockey leagues in the past, some have been successful, some haven't, but I think just in general, women's sports is booming. So it's definitely an exciting time to be a pro women's hockey player, but just being a female athlete right now it really feels like a special time.
Hey, women's sports on the rise. We love to see it. It's about dang time. We know the product has always been good. So love to also see that women's hockey in that conversation as well. So, you played with PWHL Ottawa. You talked about this just a moment ago. I mean, it's best playing against the best all in one league, but also we saw what we see in the NHL, even right now, the WNBA underway, and that, you're getting also arguably different eras, little small pockets of time in women's hockey, all converging on the ice together. So what was it like, to play with some of the heavy hitters that you had on that roster in Ottawa?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to play with Brianne Jenner, and, she's obviously a couple years older than me, and I grew up watching her. I'm Canadian, she's Canadian. So, we finished the year on the same line and, built some really special chemistry. And obviously I look up to her and I learned so much from her, not just on the ice, but off the ice, the way she carries herself. So, that was really special to play with her. And then, there's so many incredible players on Ottawa. I could go down the list, but there's just so many, older girls that I didn't play against in college. So to, be in the same league and on the same team as them was really cool. And, Emily Clark is one to mention. I missed her at Wisconsin. She's a couple years older than me. So to play with her was super cool. Savannah Harmon, she's obviously American. She's an incredible defenseman. I could just go on, but I guess it was just really fun to play with so many players that, you look up to. And just having the opportunity to finally, same league, same team, it was really cool.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned two of or a couple of the top scorers, but you were in that mix as well, Daryl. Let's not forget, you were up there. So top three in points, but goals overall, you actually were able to beat out as you said, your line mate towards the back end of the season. Gabby Hughes also up there. Katarzyna Mrazova, fantastic talent. And then Teresa Vanishova, also a former teammate of yours that you reunited in Ottawa. But I want to ask you this because for those who maybe are not familiar with your hockey journey, especially on the pro side, Daryl, you know, you came to, at the time, the PHF league and the Toronto team, and you came in mid-season, mid-form, and, you know, you and I have talked about how it can be tough. You know, you hadn't been on the ice. You thought maybe you were stepping away from hockey, at least at the most elite level altogether. But then you find your stride in the league predating this one, and then you come to the PWHL. Again, top 3-point scorer overall, top goal scorer on your team last season. What was clicking for you? You know, what were you kind of feeling as far as your game, and how were your teammates able to support your growth on the ice?
Yeah, I mean, it's been when you put it like that, it's been a crazy past 2 seasons. Oh,
you're good. You're good. No, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, I can't see you anymore, so I was like, oh no.
Just refocusing. That's on me. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so past 2 seasons have been crazy. Like you said, I was retired for, I don't know if it was like 8 months or 6 months, but before joining the PHF, you know, I stopped playing hockey and I had no intention of playing hockey. So that was a crazy experience just because, you know, I wasn't on the ice for like over half a year. So the amount of muscle that I lost, and just like, that was a crazy experience. I remember because I joined them mid-season and I was like, okay, you know, we had lots of discussions about, you know, I'm not the player that you would expect me to be just because I haven't played in a year. And I'll never forget the head coach, Geraldine Heaney, for one drill, she wanted me to like dump the puck to the far end. And I was so weak that I couldn't raise the puck to the glass because I had lost all of my like forearm muscle. But
Wow.
That was crazy. But jumping to this PWHL season, you know, I've been working incredibly hard since, you know, joining 2 years ago, the PHF Toronto 6. I've been working with Gary Roberts' team. They train up in Newmarket, Aurora, like Richmond Hill area. So worked really hard with them to get back in shape and even, you know, reach new levels of fitness, which helped me, I feel like prepared me for, you know, the PWHL because, you know, it's a lot faster than college hockey. And then with Ottawa, you know, the players on the team, like I mentioned before, Brianne Jenner, Razova, played with Gabby Hughes, Emily Clark. You know, they're just all special players. And when I joined Jenny and Mraska on a line, you know, maybe like halfway into the season, we had lots of chemistry and, you know, we just clicked. So I think once that line united is where I kind of found my stride and gained confidence. And yeah, that was an enjoyable time.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of wild. You know, you're just not used to not being able to do certain things in small little drills, and having to build that back is kind of wild. But you're young still, so you were able to do it again, had success with that Ottawa team. So that brings me to this offseason. You know, you are officially unretired. We know you're coming back. You'll be suiting up for the Toronto squad. So, you know, you talked a little bit about some of the team and some of the people that you have behind you to help you get to where you want at the elite hockey level. But, you know, what will this offseason, or what has it looked like for you, Daryl, as you get ready to compete in another pro season?
Yeah, I'm back training with Gary Roberts and his team. Right now they train in the summers, they train out of St. Andrews College, which is a prep school north of Toronto. So yeah, just say, you know, off-season training's kind of in full swing right now. You know, it's just like the standard off-ice training and then on ice. There's actually a little league in Toronto, like a summer league. It started last season. It's run out of Canlan, Etobicoke, by Ray LeBlanc, and that's on Thursdays all summer. So I'm super excited for that, just because, you know, it's a really long off season, obviously, like especially for the PWHL. So I look forward to that every week.
I always find it interesting, athletes, how they approach off season. Like you said, sometimes there are leagues that you can play in. There are also a decent amount, at least here in the state, on stateside. I know that some players will do like roller hockey or like deck hockey, a little bit of that. And then there's also athletes that stay away from hockey altogether. Do you have a period of time once one season ends before another one begins where you're like, you know what, no specific hockey drills or activities, and maybe you just do other things to stay fit?
I would say like typically throughout like my career, I guess after the season ends, I'll take like 2 weeks, a month off, and just, go really light on the training. I don't touch the ice. I might have stayed off the ice this year for like a month and a half or something. But yeah, just train in other ways. I think it's nice to just step away from the rink for a little bit, let your hockey just like simmer down for a bit before you get like really back into it. You need to take a break.
Yeah, for sure. And, I also asked Allie Monroe this question.
And thanks again to Erica L. Ayala for our bi-weekly Women's Hockey Spotlight. You just heard the first part of her interview with Daryl Watts. To watch the second part, we'll put a link in the show notes to our Women's Hockey Spotlight in its entirety on YouTube. So check that out as well. I'm Gil Martin. She's Rachel Donner. I will be back on Monday interviewing 3 of our local hosts about the biggest stories from around the NHL. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL podcast.